For decades, the Swaggart name stood tall as a beacon of televangelical influence, broadcasting fiery sermons, orchestrating global crusades, and commanding millions in donations. But behind the golden curtain of gospel glamour, something deeply sinister simmered, a secret so bold, so reckless, it would have shattered the legacy of any other ministry. Yet, for Donnie and Frances Swaggart, silence was the price of power. They knew, and they let it happen. Gabriel Swaggart, once presented as the torchbearer of Jimmy Swaggart Ministries JSM, stood confidently before the world, his voice booming across pulpits and live streams. Introduced with grandeur and honorifics, many believed he held a doctorate in theology, a title whispered with reverence and pride. But there was just one problem. There was no real doctorate, no thesis, no academic scrutiny, no rigorous seminary or prestigious biblical institution backing it. Instead, according to insiders, Gabriel's degree came from a non-accredited online source. Worse, Dr. Hughes, once a respected academic voice within the inner circle, allegedly facilitated and fast-tracked Gabriel's so-called doctorate. Dr. Hughes, initially trusted by many at JSM, found himself questioning the ethics of what he had done. Over private texts, confidential emails, and whispered conversations behind church curtains, the truth began leaking. By the time Dr. Hughes finally broke his silence, the damage was done. The lie had been embedded deep in the ministry's branding. But here's what's even more chilling. Donnie and Frances Swaggart knew from the start. They didn't just discover it later, they approved it. In a leaked email dated back to 2017, Frances allegedly responded to a query about Gabriel's credentials with a dismissive tone. "We know what matters is the anointing, not the accreditation." That single sentence would haunt the ministry's credibility for years to come. Donnie, meanwhile, was reportedly the mastermind behind the PR push. According to a former JSM employee who later spoke under anonymity, Donnie personally instructed the media team to always refer to Gabriel as Dr. Swaggart across promotional materials, press releases, and even guest invitations. Gabriel needed to look legitimate, the source claimed. They were grooming him for succession, and in their world, optics mattered more than truth. Why would parents allow their son to build a platform on falsehood? Why would they risk the very integrity of a ministry that survived scandals, ridicule, and decades of scrutiny? Because simply put, the ministry was bleeding. Donor numbers were declining. Viewership had dipped since the 90s. The next generation wasn't buying into the fire and brimstone televangelism anymore. They needed a young face, a doctor who could blend in with the scholarly elite of Christian media. And Gabriel was their only hope. Dr. Hughes, initially complicit, eventually walked away, disillusioned and angry. In a bombshell podcast appearance, he claimed, "I was told to make it happen. When I resisted," Frances said, "Do you want to stay on payroll or not?" His revelation didn't just expose Gabriel, it exposed the machinery, the manipulation, the carefully crafted illusion JSM operated under. Even more disturbing, some students at JSM's affiliated Bible college reportedly approached administrators with questions about Gabriel's degree. Those students were swiftly discouraged from pursuing answers. One was even expelled after making too much noise on social media. The deception was layered, not just about the degree, but about what it represented. It wasn't just a fake title, it was a symbol of inherited privilege, of unchecked power passed down not through calling or merit, but through family name and media manipulation. Some loyalists of the Swaggart family have since defended them, claiming the degree didn't matter in the grand scheme, that God uses flawed vessels, that Gabriel still preaches the truth. But critics argue differently. How can someone preach truth when their foundation is built on lies? Former members of the ministry began to speak up in waves. Anonymous testimonies flooded forums. One ex-volunteer wrote, "It was like watching a play. Everything was choreographed. Gabriel's degree was just one of many illusions they sold us." Now, years later, the consequences continue to unravel. New donors have withdrawn. Faithful followers have turned skeptical, and the Swaggarts remain silent. Not a single formal statement, not an apology, not even a retraction of the doctor title. So why did Donnie and Frances let it happen? Because acknowledging the truth would mean unraveling the empire they spent decades rebuilding after Jimmy's scandal. It would mean facing lawsuits, returning donations, and, worst of all, watching Gabriel fall. And they couldn't afford that. In the end, this isn't just about a fake degree. It's about deception at the highest level of American televangelism. It's about legacy over truth, about power over integrity. Donnie and Frances knew, and they let it happen. Behind the polished sermons, glossy studio lights, and seemingly pristine ministries, lies a decades-long power dynamic soaked in secrets, ambition, and scandal. The revelation about Gabriel's questionable credentials did not just spark online outrage, it has thrown open the floodgates of scrutiny into the very leadership structure of Jimmy Swaggart Ministries (JSM). And if whispers from insiders hold weight, Donnie and Frances were not just passive observers. They allegedly enabled, endorsed, and even protected the deceit. Let's unpack this in full depth. The rise of Gabriel Swaggart, a legacy of expectation. Born into the towering legacy of his grandfather Jimmy Swaggart, Gabriel was always expected to carry the torch of the family ministry. From childhood appearances on stage to eventually hosting his own segments on the Son Life broadcasting network, his path was laid out for him. But unlike Jimmy's relentless years of preaching or Donnie's fiery public persona, Gabriel's credentials were often questioned by critics and insiders alike. He was never known for academic scholarship, and that's where the controversy begins. Around 2019, rumors began swirling that Gabriel Swaggart had obtained a doctorate from a little-known online institution. At first, it seemed to be harmless. Many pastors receive honorary degrees. But what if this wasn't honorary? What if the ministry had quietly helped craft a fake academic narrative around him? Enter Dr. Hughes, the whistleblower no one saw coming. Dr. Benjamin Hughes, a respected Christian educator, had been consulting with JSM during their media expansion years. Known for his advocacy of educational integrity within ministry work, Hughes was shocked to learn of what he called fabricated qualifications. According to Hughes, Gabriel's so-called doctorate was completed via an unaccredited online course, with pre-written assignments and manipulated timelines. Worse, Hughes alleges that he was pressured by Frances herself to endorse the degree. "I told Frances that Gabriel hadn't done the work, he hadn't earned the title of doctor, but she looked me in the eye and said, 'This isn't about education, it's about image.'" Dr. Hughes' confidential source. Donnies Silence, strategic or shameful? Donnie Swaggart has always maintained a powerful yet elusive role within JSM. Known for his fiery sermons and fierce loyalty to family, he has rarely addressed criticism publicly. But insiders claim Donnie was fully aware of Gabriel's academic shortcut. An anonymous JSM employee revealed Donnie didn't just know, he approved it. He said, "It's what the people expect. He needs the title to be respected like the rest of us." Why would a man so committed to preaching the truth knowingly support a lie? Was it to secure Gabriel's succession, or was it part of a larger strategy to keep the ministry under tight family control? Frances Swaggart, the matriarch with the master plan. Frances has long been seen as the backbone of the Swaggart family. Sharp, strategic, and highly involved behind the scenes, she is often credited with preserving the ministry after Jimmy's scandals in the late 1980s. If anyone had the motive and means to manufacture Gabriel's academic persona, it was Frances. Dr. Hughes claims she orchestrated the entire operation. She wanted to build a legacy, not just for Jimmy, but for the Swaggart name. And she believed Gabriel needed that title to lead, said a former ministry board member. Frances allegedly coordinated with diploma mills, drafted PR statements, and even went as far as staging a graduation-like ceremony on campus, complete with photos and fanfare, all to make it look official. Why the lie was dangerous, beyond just reputation. In the ministry world, a doctorate isn't just a title, it's a symbol of authority, spiritual insight, and trust. When that trust is broken, it damages not only the individual, but the entire faith community that follows. Several pastors who once endorsed JSM have distanced themselves after the scandal. Donations reportedly dropped 8% in the 3 months after the story broke. Even Son Life's viewer engagement declined sharply. But perhaps the biggest damage is to the younger generation. Gabriel has been a figurehead for youth outreach within JSM. If he built his image on a lie, what message does that send to the very generation the ministry claims to uplift? Family over faith? The Swaggart Dilemma. The core question remains, why did Donnie and Frances let Gabriel lie? The answer may lie in one word: control. By ensuring Gabriel had a doctorate, the Swaggarts could market him as a legitimate heir to Jimmy's legacy. They could consolidate power, silence critics, and maintain the family dynasty. In their eyes, perhaps, the ends justified the means. But in doing so, they didn't just betray their followers, they betrayed the very principles of the gospel they claimed to preach. Voices of the congregation, faith shaken, but not destroyed. Many loyal followers of JSM were heartbroken upon learning the truth. On forums and in private Facebook groups, members shared their confusion and grief. "I trusted them. I tithed to them. I believed in their mission. Now I feel fooled." If Frances knew, How can she still sit on that stage and preach? I still believe in Jesus, but I no longer believe in the Swaggarts. Yet some have doubled down in defense, arguing that Gabriel's ministry work outweighs academic dishonesty. One supporter wrote, "Even if the degree is fake, his calling is real." What happens next? The road ahead for JSM. With growing calls for transparency, JSM faces a critical crossroads. Will they admit the truth? Will Gabriel publicly renounce the title? Or will they continue down the path of silence, hoping the storm passes? Already, whispers of internal division have surfaced. Frances is said to be furious over leaks. Donnie has reportedly avoided direct confrontation with Gabriel, choosing instead to focus on damage control. Some insiders claim Jimmy Swaggart himself, now in fragile health, is unaware of the full extent of the controversy. Others believe he knows, and has chosen silence as the final act of protection for his family. Conclusion: a house built on sand. The Bible warns of building on unstable foundations. If the Swaggarts have built their empire on image rather than integrity, then perhaps this scandal is not just a stumble, but a divine reckoning. For Gabriel, the choice is clear: come clean or live with a lie. For Donnie and Frances, the question remains, what matters more, truth or legacy? And for the countless followers watching this unfold, one haunting question lingers. In the ministry world, a doctorate isn't just a title, it's a symbol of authority, spiritual insight, and trust. When that trust is broken, it damages not only the individual but the entire faith community that follows them. Several pastors who once endorsed JSM have distanced themselves after the scandal. Donations reportedly dropped 8% in the 3 months after the story broke. Even Son Life's viewer engagement declined sharply. But perhaps the biggest damage is to the younger generation. Gabriel has been a figurehead for youth outreach within JSM. If he built his image on a lie, what message does that send to the very generation the ministry claims to uplift? Family over faith? The Swaggart Dilemma. The core question remains, why did Donnie and Frances let Gabriel